tarot cards are often the first step and basis for a seeker of metaphysical knowledge, like you, to discover your forever path. That could be astrology, numerology, healing arts, or any other spiritual interest you discover along the way. Elaine Ireland is not only a teacher of tarot, she is a mentor who supports you and will be there for you. Visit www.elaineIrelandtarotmaster.com now and discover how Elaine's mentoring, tarot card and psychic readings, tarot card classes, and more help you to grow into the true being you are meant to be. Welcome to Conversations with the Ancients, where you're about to discover a whole different world than the one that, up until now, you've believed you're familiar with. World-Renowned Metaphysicist, practicing psychic and tarot teacher Elaine Ireland invites you on a journey where you'll hear voices from the past, interviews with some of the greatest metaphysicians you've never heard of, because in their time, they needed to move with stealth. You'll also meet today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who will show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Be sure you visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, hear the words of metaphysicians who blazed the trail. You're not in jail, thanks to them.
And this handsome young man sitting in front of me is?
I'm Jesse Prejean. I'm a spiritual coach, teacher, and psychic medium professionally, and very adept in the world of metaphysics. And I've done a lot, and I still do and explore a lot in that realm. And there's always more to learn. And so that's what I'm here for. I'm here to explore and definitely help others on their journey as well. Mine started sometime around 2011 when I got serious about it. And here I am in 2024, still very much connected to this path and still growing and evolving. So that's me. Who are you?
That's such a, I'm fine today.
Yeah.
I'm here and I'm excited about visiting with you. And full disclosure here, Jesse and I have known a while. He joined a tarot class a while back. Wasn't that before the pandemic, or was it right after the pandemic?
It was right before. I think it was 2018, 2019, somewhere around there.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Wow, Jesse.
It's been a while.
My opinion of Jesse when I met him. He called, we visited, he joined the class, knocked on the door. It was dark outside. I knew he had taken a bus a couple of blocks to my house. And every time he left, I said, can I take you home? And he said, no, I'll be fine with the bus. Scared me to death. But he was standing on the porch and kind of had his back to me a little bit. And my first kind of impression or image of him was that he should be in a hooded cloak. And as he turned to face me, it was like I was looking at the hermit. Now, he did not have the cloak on. He did not have a hood on. He had normal guy clothes on with jacket. It was a little cool outside. But I had to kind of stop and blink my eyes a couple of times and go, oh, he's not wearing a cloak. And then my next thought was, why isn't he? So I didn't tell him that for a long time, but that was my impression. So I automatically went, after the class was over, I automatically went into thinking, do we have a past life together? And was he aware that he had perhaps worn that kind of clothing and been a priest or a hermit? Not a hermit. I refer to hermit as in the tarot deck, which is kind of what he looked like to me, with a shorter beard. But, and folks, if you're not familiar with that, you can find the hermit card on the internet without buying a whole deck of cards. But the Rider-Waite deck is what the imagery that I would want you to check with. But Jesse constantly came across that way in class. His voice was soft. His comments were important and few between. And it was though he was thinking for 2 minutes before he responded, because he tried to pick it. He was choosing his words very carefully. At least that was the impression I got, even when he'd ask a question. And I always knew that he knew a lot more than he was sharing with us. it's almost as though he was not pretending, but he was maybe unassumedly still the student. And there was a certain maturity about him in the classes and in the way he accepted knowledge. So I saw this outer area called a body, but the soul was so much older. And then we've lost touch with each other for a while. And when he started coming back into my life, he had jumped light years ahead. And when I thought that the first time, I said, has he really, or was he always there? And now he's just allowing it to come out. And I think that's what it is. Like some of that was personal challenges. That's his to discuss if he wants to. I think there was the normal process of what do I want to learn? Who do I want to learn from? Do I have the money to buy the books? Do I have the money to take the classes? Da, 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 da. Do I have the time? Do I have the energy? Because I knew for a long time he was, hold that cup up. They have to read that cup.
I think it might be words on the screen, but working.
No, it's great. Work your magic. I love it. We're going to get there. That's part of our discussion today. So what have I left out? What's wrong? What's right? Tell the public.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's you. I don't think you've ever expressed in that depth your impression of me, but it definitely makes sense because I try to approach learning, especially when I came to you to learn the tarot. I was quite a bit intimidated when I came because I had heard, you had a very significant standing reputation. And the first day in class, you called me out on something psychically. And I was like, oh, what am I in for? I think you said something like, when's the last time you've gotten a physical? And I was like, oh, crap. It's been like 4 years. Like, what does she know, So yeah, that first impression was a little intimidating for me. But yeah, at that time, I had so many different synchronicities and things pulling me into the direction of expanding my knowledge, because up to that point, mainly what I had studied was Reiki, which I became attuned to after my awakening around 2012. So I've been practicing energy healing and different modalities of energy healing and different ways of working with energy and visualization and meditation. So that's what I had been accustomed to. And then sometime around 2016, I also got into mediumship. And then I thought too, know that tarot itself is really kind of a powerful tool. And it just makes sense that I should learn that and kind of put it into my repertoire, my spiritual metaphysical tool belt. And so before I met you, I bought this really hideous giant card, very cartoonishly drawn tarot deck. And I kind of messed around with it for a little while, but it just didn't feel right. And so I found out about you and I decided to start that class. And that really, like you said, we'll talk more about magic later. But when I stepped into that course and the way you taught, you always called it a book of knowledge. And it made more sense to me the more I learned and delved into the deck because of all the symbolism and all of these ancient, hermetic, mystic symbolism that's embedded into the cards. Really, for me, took me on a significant journey that I'm still growing into today as a Kabbalist and a ritual magician. But yeah, that was a really formative time in my life as well. I think we had a lot of really fun, cool experiences learning the tarot. Yeah, you were really helpful in being able to see things that I couldn't see about myself. That gave me a lot of, I guess, courage to step into it and confidence to step into it in a way that I might have been limiting myself. And eventually, not long after studying with you, I started offering readings as well. And that really took me into a new area of intuitive development, psychic development, and it also really improved my mediumship skills as well. Subsequently started working, professionally as a medium. So yeah, you were always there to hold space for us and make us coffee. And it was just such a really relaxed way to learn. Despite me feeling a bit intimidated, that went away after a few weeks. Yeah, but I really enjoyed that format and it felt very personal because we came to your house and you were able to relate the lessons to personal experience, which I find and I know is incredibly important for people who are stepping onto a spiritual path, right? There's so many concepts, there's so much knowledge out there, right? That it can really take this kind of foreign context until you can relate it to something kind of personal, which is what I wanted to do with you today, is to talk about our stories and our experience and how what we do impacts our lives, has changed our lives, and impacts the lives of other people. Because I think if we're not practicing the knowledge, if we're not putting it into some kind of practical modality or context, that we're limiting ourselves. Knowledge is knowledge, but without the practice, it doesn't become wisdom. And so the more deeply
Wait, say that again. Say that again for the public. Without the practice,
it doesn't become wisdom. Knowledge without practice doesn't become wisdom, right? So if we don't have the practical experience of something, then all we have is ideas and concepts. So for me, I spent a lot of time studying and gaining knowledge of metaphysics and the spiritual world. But also there was this part of me that needed to demonstrate it, because I knew that it's not just about what you know, it's about how you live it, right? And so when I started applying all of the metaphysical knowledge I had gained, over the years when I was younger, it changed my life. And I think that's the most important part, is that we can learn, we can read books, we can take classes, but until we apply it, it really doesn't do much for us. So that's been my approach today. Like, again, we'll talk more about it, but when I started diving into Ritual Magick about 4 years ago, I knew something in the practice of it was the most important part. And gaining the knowledge may come with it, but the practice is really what is, to me, most important. So yeah, I'm here to share some experience and hear about your experience. I know we plan to talk about our psychic experiences, and I know you were very much psychically attuned as a child and all that, which I find fascinating, because that's not particularly my story. I didn't grow up around.
I didn't realize you. Nobody's ever said that. Thank you.
Yeah.
The child thing. Interesting.
Yeah. So I know for me, and I guess we can just kind of go into psychic stuff, because I know people love to hear about it. And that's one of those things that is one of the aspects of practice and application that is really important to understand what our psychic abilities are and what they're for and how we can harness them. And people love to hear about, what are the psychic senses? How can I tune into them? What's the best way to work with them? And we can just talk about the clairs.
Yes, the clairs are very important. In my opinion, some people have some sharper than others, clairs than others. So you pick one or two or three, throw them out there. Let's start.
Let's start with the favorite, clairvoyance, which is, clear seeing. I think for a lot of people, that tends to be one of the most impactful psychic experiences, when we are able to have these visions or see things in the mind's eye or objectively and validate those things. And I want to share a story, because this really changed my understanding of that sense of clairvoyance and what it means to be psychically connected to that subtle realm, that's where we tune in to harness intuition, to harness our psychic senses. It's very much a subtler form of reality. So let's travel back to, this is probably 2013 or 2014. And I was working at a call center for medical research studies. So company would advertise, hey, we're testing this medication, call this number, get paid to be part of a study. And so in the call center, we would take these phone calls and take someone through a questionnaire and all that stuff. It was a very boring job. There was nothing going on most of the time. We would spend 12-hour days sometimes and take I kid you not, a total of 6 phone calls. Like sometimes it was just that dull. And around that time, so I had my awakening around 2012, end of 2011. And so I had been developing a bit and coming into more awareness of my psychic senses at that time. One day at work, very slow day, we decided to play some games. So we would bring board games or whatever. There were about 5 of us in the office. So we set up a game of Clue. I'm sure everybody listening hopefully has played Clue. We played a couple of games, and when you set up a game of Clue, you choose your character and you do all that, and then you shuffle the cards, and then someone takes a card from each deck. So there's a person, a room, and a weapon. So you take a card from the person deck, take a card from the room deck, you take a card from the weapons deck, because you're trying to figure out who the murderer is, right? You're trying to solve this case. And so with 3 of those cards, no one's looking, you put them into an envelope, and that envelope goes into the middle of the board. And basically the format of the game is you try to figure out through your moves and watching the other players who the murderer is. And then in the game, someone says, I'm sure that this is the person, this is the room, this is the weapon. And then you reveal the cards, right? So we get to our 3rd game. I don't know what came over me, but it was just kind of I wanted to try something. We had put the cards into the envelope, put them on the game board. And I said, I wonder if I could tap into that without seeing them. And so I picked up the envelope with the cards, and I didn't have a doubt in my mind, which I think is also really important to know. And I touched the envelope to my forehead, to my 3rd eye. Sure enough, in my mind's eye, I saw all 3 cards as clear as day. It was just kind of in passing. I saw the person, I saw the room, and I saw the weapon. And I thought to myself, I think this is it. This is right. So I wrote it down just so that I could, clarify. And everyone else sitting around the game board also saw this happen. We started the game. I played my turns as if that were the answer. And we only got maybe 2-3 turns into the game, which isn't very far. It generally takes a while for you to get to the point where you can deduce the answer. And I played a couple of turns and I was like, I really think this is it. I really think what I saw was a true vision. And I decided to call it. Said, I know the answer. I'm going to end the game. And I believe it was something like Miss Peacock in the kitchen with a lead pipe. And so
what a mix. A mixture.
Yeah.
In the kitchen with a lead pipe. Okay.
I called the game and pulled the cards out of the envelope. Sure enough, it was Miss Peacock in the kitchen with a lead pipe. And I was blown away, like that was a really impactful connection to clairvoyance that I'd never experienced in my life. And granted, it was more of a kind of a fun experience and not necessarily, I wasn't doing a reading, but I think Spirit gave me that opportunity to really recognize how true this was. And so I want to share this part of the story because this is a really funny part. Everyone's kind of like, how did you do that? And, I'm like, I don't know how I did that. I just trusted. There was kind of a weirdness afterwards because nobody really knew what to think. We decided to set up another game. And so we had put, some new cards in the envelope, and everybody's just kind of shuffling around, not really paying attention. And this is the funny part. There's a guy sitting across the other side of the board, and I see him out of the corner of my eyes. He was like checking to see if anybody was looking, and he grabs the envelope and starts touching it near his forehead to see if he can read.
I love it.
But yeah, so that was a game changer for me. And at that time, I think I needed really those types of experiences to validate. And that's one of the things in development. I know for me, and this is what you were super helpful with in studying tarot, but every mentor that I've had, it's important to get that validation and that what you're working with is true and meaningful for you. And it helps us get a sense of how to tune into that stuff in a way where we're developing a sense of accuracy with how we read, with clairvoyance, right? That inner seeing. After that, I started to learn about the clairs. At that time, I don't think I knew much about it, but I knew I had seen something in my inner vision. And then I started to learn more about, what the clairs were beyond clairvoyance. So I want to.
You did something instinctively that many people teach how to do. And it came to you because when I was teaching psychic development, I don't teach it anymore, but I used to. I would go into magazines. Remember those things, magazines? I don't see them out there very much anymore. But newspaper clippings, something. But I would go with, and I would even use, because I was teaching school at the time when I first started this, I had all kinds of classroom stuff like colored paper and what do they call it? I had fabric around the house, some, all kinds of things. And when you're teaching something like that, you can keep it really simple and cut out a red square or just a strip. So it doesn't have to be big. Or you can get complicated and make it like a cloud or a heart or a shape. So you're really putting a shape and a color or a shape and a fabric. Let's say it's paisley. And more people than not, when they realized when they were working with that envelope, they'd say, it looks like a bunch of worms. Because paisley's kind of, or they'd say it's got a bulb at the top and a point at the bottom. Okay. But I would cut out like 20 different envelopes because I'd only have about 8 or 9 people in class, sometimes 6. And I'd have them pull the envelope. I didn't just hand it to them. They got to pick it. Sometimes it was just on a table, but I had all kinds of things. I had pictures of cars, pictures of water. I had more complicated pictures like a beach that had umbrellas and people and animals. And I would keep them real simple at first. And they were in brown, thick envelopes. You could not see through them. And they'd pick an envelope and then they'd either hold it in their hands. We do a hands cleansing, so to speak. And they would hold them in their hands. Sometimes they would instinctively put it on their throat chakra or their third eye instinctively. I didn't tell them what to do. I said, what's in that envelope? And you could hear people go, but it was interesting, especially with the more complicated pictures like clouds and water and beach and things. Sometimes they'd get the whole picture. Sometimes they'd even tell you what the people had on. And sometimes they'd just pick up one thing. One girl picked out, she said, I see white clouds, but everything else is real cloudy. Well, what she'd picked up was a picture of a harbor where the boats were coming through the fog.
Yeah. Okay.
But there was a lot of white above it because of the lights that were coming off of the boat.
Right.
So I thought that was an interesting way and way to pick things out. So you taught yourself instinctively how to work with that and how to practice it. And there's another thing that you said that I don't think you even realized you said was you have to trust your instinct. You have to trust what you're getting because it's your information. If you're doing that with a person, like somebody brought you was looking for an object or even a person and they brought you a blouse or something, a dog collar, and and you held it. That's called psychometry. So in a way, that's a partner to what you did instinctively. You can hold on to a piece of clothing, which is very common, or a dog collar, even though it's not the animal that's missing, it's the person, but they're so attached to that dog that's at home that you may pick up something about where they are. So psychometry is considered a basic form of psychic ability, but it is a very important part to development. And you did it instinctively. Did you continue to win the game?
Well, that one I won, but
Yeah.
I didn't try again after that. I was just
Jesse.
kind of blown away, and I didn't want to cheat anymore. I felt like I didn't want to use that to my advantage.
That's very important. Jesse just said an ethics statement. He did. And people say all the time, give me the numbers for the lotto.
Right.
Or what am I going to win when I go to Vegas? And I could usually tell people with a yes answer with a true or just instinctively say, you'll win, but you're not going to win the Mega Million. You'll win. You may cover your trip. be happy if you cover your trip, kind of thing. But when it came to doing it for myself, when we went to Vegas, and we sometimes went 3 or 4 times a year because of work involvement, teaching I did some fairs there, and it never worked for me, not once. But I could go stand next to a slot machine, which is something I love to do, and I might cover my trip. It kind of got to be a joke. We would land, especially when we were meeting other people. We always went by Southwest. And it was at one time in the Vegas airport, the furthest one away from the luggage, which meant you had to go down this ramp and pass hundreds of machines. And it was just fun. We would sometimes we'd stay in the Southwest area and wait for everybody to come, and then we'd go get our luggage. And they had serious slot machines set up. They had attendants and so forth. And it got to be a joke where I would just take like $20, which was then a generous amount. This was many years ago. And I could make our money. I could cover our money for the airplane, unless it had been paid for by whoever was bringing us in. Where we stayed, potential food, everything. I could cover it with right after I landed. It got to be a joke. And it was also a way of seeing how well we were going to do, or how well I was going to do on the slot machines. I was there, but that was it. There was no winning any big amount of money. That would have been, like you were just saying, cheating, so to speak. Right. But if somebody else said, okay, what machines am I going to look for? And I might say something like, well, the apples are really common. So I'd look, or one time I told this lady to look for pigs. Pigs. Well, of course, she looked for pigs at the hotel they were staying at. No pigs. So she asked one of the attendants, what hotels, what bars, where can I find slot machines with pigs? And the lady thought for a minute. And she said, that's going to be off the main strip. You're going to have to go to maybe one of the neighborhood places. Let me ask around. So she did. And she came back with 2. One was a bar, a neighborhood bar. And another one was, it was a hotel that was old. And they had everything up to quarters and nothing over quarters. And the lady thought, I'm not going to win anything. But she decided, what the heck? So the next morning, she and a girlfriend got in a cab, went over to this. They were going to try both, but they went to the hotel first. Walked in, she said it smelled like the oldest rum in the world and had like floors had never been cleaned. They found 2 pig machines. One lady sat on one on the other. They both had to wait to play the machines, but they did patiently. They even enjoyed a drink or two. She won $120,000.
Wow.
A thing on a quarter machine.
Wow.
Now, if anybody knows Vegas, you always put the maximum in.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the trick. If it calls for 4, sure, you can put 1 quarter in, but you're going to get a different roll. And she always would put in, I think it was a 3-er, but nobody had won anything big from there for like 3 years. And she won $120,000. But she had to go look for that pig.
Yeah. Yeah. It didn't come too easy, did it?
No. And I saw a guy winning a red, white, and blue. Those are real common. They're 7s, and they're 3 7s, 3 white, 3 blue. But if you win red, white, and blue, or you win red, white, blue stars, or 2-star, that's the way it was set up in the past. And he won the red, white, and blue. And I jokingly said, how patriotic are you? And he said, well, I'm ex-Navy. And I said, look for the red, white, and blues. Well, you see them everywhere.
Right.
I mean, they're very common in Vegas. And he called me from Vegas and he said, red, white, and blue machines are everywhere. He had an F-bomb in there. And I said, honey, I'm sorry. And then I saw the Four Queens. No, it's an old place, and it's off the strip. It's not downtown. It's in the old town. And it's a block or 2, I think, away from Fitzgerald. And I told him about the Queens, and he said, oh, we're staying in that area. And I said, are you at the Fitz? I said, that's where we used to stay all the time. He said, no. He said, it's got a cowboy or cowgirl in front. And okay. I said, well, go to the Queens and see what you can do. He won $50,000.
What?
He said, I walked in and I saw the machine and I just walked right up to it and I put $10 in it and I won. But he had to go looking for it. And one guy asked me if I worked for a percentage. And I said, I don't understand. He said, well, do you want a percentage of what I win? And I said, no, no. I did find out that there was a lady. She came to me for a reading. Actually, I went to her. She worked exclusively with horse races, exclusively. And people would fight over her, especially for the big races. They'd send her planes. They'd go pick her up. One guy, she didn't ask for it, but a couple of years after he won really, really big, and he knew that she was worried about getting her kid through college, he called her and he said, I've got your son's college taken care of. And she said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I've paid the University of Texas for 5 years, so he can play the first year and have fun, and then I expect him to get busy. And it was an estimated amount of money, went through the registrar's office. Everything was paid for. Room, board, books, everything. She didn't have to spend a penny on that kid, all because she had won him millions of dollars. And she had whatever, it was kind of like a tip, whatever they wanted to tip her.
Yeah.
And they'd give her cash. Sometimes they would give her objects. One guy gave her a fur coat when it was still okay to own fur coats. Another guy paid for a year's worth of mortgage on her house. I mean, we're talking with high rollers here. Yeah. She didn't say, if you win $1 million, I get 10%. It's not how it works. And he asked, well, how much? And she didn't study the tracks. She didn't study whatever those things are called. She just closed her eyes and then she'd say, okay, you need to put this much down on this race and this horse name, if she could come up with it, or it's a solid black and it's da-da-da-da-da. Or sometimes she'd even stay on the plane or stay at the hotel. She wouldn't even go to the racetrack. She didn't want to be associated.
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah. Psychics are weird.
Right.
But that was her side. That was her specialty.
Right. And that's kind of like pushing on the border of, like ethics a bit, but like doing this work. But yeah, and I get it. I mean, you have a gift and there's a way that it can be used to other people's benefit, right? And that's the whole point of being psychic, I mean, in my opinion, to do this work is to, help and support people in certain ways that, help them see things they, might have a blind spot for, or, help them, connect with spirit in a way that gives them guidance on an issue, help them solve their problems, help them live a better life, help them, become more of, who they are, who they're meant to be in this life. And I think that is kind of at the core of my ethical approach to it is, I'm a servant in some way, or I'm a coworker with spirit, right? And
I like that, coworker with spirit. I like that.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, but yeah, that speaking of the clairs again, I think the one for me that kind of became more impactful long-term for me, especially in mediumship, and you may know what I'm talking about here, is clairsentience.
Oh yeah.
Which is clear feeling, right? And so the sensory feeling, emotion, physical sensation, way that spirit communicates with us. And the reason I feel like I picked up on that and that became one of my, I guess, primary psychic senses is because I've always been very emotionally and energetically attuned to people in my environment, which people call that being empathic or being an empath, right? Someone who feels a lot, someone who can feel other people's emotions, someone who is really attuned to environments and spaces that, they can pick up on what's going on through that sense. And I'd always been like that. I always been a sensitive kid. And, as I got older, I realized, well, that was in a way a gift for me as a psychic and an intuitive, but back then was quite problematic, and still even into adulthood had been quite problematic to feel and sense so much on that level. Because for a lot of us that are highly sensitive like that, we tend to internalize those things, right? Because we're so attuned to it that we think it's ours, or we think we're responsible for it. But over the years, when I started healing some of those patterns that caused me to be more internalizing of my environment and people, I realized that was a profound gift that I had as a psychic and an intuitive, and that I could put that into use primarily in my mediumship. Because when I started learning mediumship, one of the things I learned off the bat was that what's different from psychic work is that in psychic work, we're tuning into information that's more related to kind of the earth realm, right? Like we're picking up on a person's life, their relationships, their financial status, their emotions, all of these things, how things play out in the real world. Where versus mediumship, we're connecting with a vibration of consciousness that's a little further out from the earth plane. So we're tapping into a different quality of energy. And when we do that, what I was taught to do was to feel that person, to feel that spirit, to blend my energy with the energy of that spirit. And that was so easy for me because, and I'll admit this, because as a person who struggled with codependency, what do codependents do? Their identity, their energy blends with a person, it blends with another environment, situation, and they take on that energy, they take on that frequency. And little did I know that same hindrance had become what really benefited me in my mediumship. So when they told me to blend with spirit, I was like, okay, I got that, no problem. And when I started working with that, I realized spirit has so much to tell me through the feeling world. I could understand their personality characteristics, became a feeling, a sense that I would take on a bit of their characteristic, and I could feel it in my energy. I could feel it in my body. They would express emotions to me through that feeling world too, through the clairsentience, where I could understand how they were as a person, their disposition. Were they really kind of rough, angry type person, or were they joyful, kind, loving, more so? Then that really comes through. And even in the physical aspects too, like when I'm communicating with spirit on that level and, we're discussing physical aspects, maybe how did they pass? And they give me a sensation in the chest, or they give me a sensation in the gut or in the head. And that's their way of physically, energetically communicating to me through a psychic sense. And that's really what got me rolling with, developing quickly as a medium, was because I could feel these things on such a deep level. And I'll tell you this, I've met a lot of mediums, and I've met a lot of people who are afraid of that aspect, who are afraid of that clair. And it's, for whatever reason, I'm not here to judge, but I think, that being said, that there's maybe a bit of a limitation around that we can impose on ourselves. And I get it. People don't want to feel a lot of things, and we don't want to feel our own stuff sometimes. I get it. But that is a way that spirit is available to us. And that's been one of my primary modes of communication up to this point. Yeah. What about you? Do you have
Do I
that
what?
sense?
How does your
sense, how does that show up for you?
I want to say this first. I'll answer your question, but I want to say this first. That can be the most common because we have terms in our vernacular. When I walked into the room, you could cut the air with a knife. Or there was suppressed joy. Somebody had a joyful secret. And you walk around a person and you know something's going on with them, whether you know them well or not. It's like a hanging piece of fruit from a tree, and you can't really. Yes, I've walked into rooms of people going, okay, this is not going to be okay. I've even left parties because it didn't feel right. And sure enough, I heard later in one case, a fight broke out. Somebody got their head knocked on the edge of the swimming pool. And, but everybody does that. They walk into a room, they walk up to a circle of people, and you just want to back off. Well, when folks out there, whether you're working in the spirit world or not, follow your instincts, because that's a common one. One of how I don't have a choice with that. I have it. So much so that if I go into a new place, a new store to shop, someone's home, someplace I've never been before, and when I was doing weddings, and I still do, I just haven't in a while, when I was performing weddings, I wanted to be there a little bit early so I could kind of do a silent cleansing, because weddings and funerals are kind of like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get throughout the day. So sometimes everything's hunky-dory, and sometimes it's not. Somebody's just waiting for the first blue to happen, and there you have it. So, it's been my way of, and I would talk to the bride about this. How long do you want me to stay? When do you want to sign your license, before or after the cake? So I'll know how long to hang around in the background, basically. But I've even gone up to people and said, so sorry, I just got a call and I need to leave. So can we go ahead and do the sign? But it was because I could feel it getting a little weird. And yes, I can fib or say, I just have a feeling I need to go. So if you don't mind, and it works. But people out there, follow your instincts. In answer to your question, I don't have a choice. It's right there.
Same.
Before I get out of the car at a new place, I will reinforce my grid, which kind of looks like I'm walking in a cloud. If you could see it, that's what it would look like. We did a joint gathering not long with Sarah Reeves, and I didn't expect any trouble that day at all. But after I got parked, I found myself going through my little cloud ritual, and I thought, what am I doing? It's going to be a great day. And it was. She created a beautifully safe space for the few vendors that she had and the speakers, which you were one of, and everything else that was going on. There was a lot of kitchen activity, and it was a beautiful energy day. I had not 1 minute of that day with anybody did I feel like I needed to back off. Yeah. So, or hide from anything. But yeah, it's an absolute common follow your instinct. If it doesn't feel right, don't go there. If it feels right, go have a great time. If you feel like you shouldn't get on that plane, then don't get on that plane.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why I tell people, when you make reservations, buy the insurance.
Yeah, you never know, right?
You never know. And I've had so many people over the years tell me, yeah, that's the plane that went down over what, da-da-da-da. That's, I understand there was a fight on that plane, and I'm so glad that I wasn't on it. And yes, it can be inconvenient, but another lady, I said, there's something about a rental car. And she said, we don't have any rental plans. And I said, well, just pay attention. And if you feel like you need to rent a car to finish the journey or get home or whatever, just spend the extra money. She went ahead and made a car rental reservation they had two plane stops where they had to change layovers. And she went ahead, and at the last stop, which was Dallas, there's a saying here in Texas, you can't go to hell without stopping at Dallas first. It's kind of a joke. It's not so much anymore, but that's the way it used to be. If you left Austin, you had to go to Dallas.
Still relevant.
Craziness. And it was on the way home. So she went ahead and made a reservation. Sure enough, there was going to be a long layover, not because of the weather, but because of they thought the weather was going to land planes. Well, it did, but she and her husband had a car reserved. They just hopped in it. What is it? A 3 hour drive? but she never would have done that. I saw it very clearly.
Yeah.
And she listened, and they got home safe and a lot earlier than they would have waiting for the plane.
Yeah.
They had to wait for their luggage. They couldn't
Oh,
get their luggage,
yeah.
but
It's not,
that,
it's better to be safe and alive.
yeah. And at least at home asleep while everybody else is
Right.
waiting for the next plane to go wherever, even to come back to Austin. They brought somebody with them too. There was a college girl that they'd been talking to, and they said, "We're leaving. Come with us. We'll drop you off at the door."
Wow.
Took care of a little karma there while they were at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
So yeah.
this reminds me of, I'll just briefly touch on this, but this could also be a whole nother topic.
And what is that? Because we need to talk about it later.
Yeah, we'll talk past lives. So
Okay.
my first experience doing a regression, a past life regression, was around 2012, 2013. And
For you or for someone else?
for myself. So I was
yourself. Okay.
having it done for me. And this ties into this, like, following that feeling, that gut instinct. And I went back to this lifetime where I had been someone who had ridden or flown in the Hindenburg. And we all know what happened to the Hindenburg. It's one of the most well-known disasters that's happened in humankind. And so if you don't know what the Hindenburg is, for some reason, it was this huge blimp that was built, and during a test flight, it caught fire. Something happened, and it basically burned to a crisp.
In fact, you can find, which is very rare for that time frame, everything you find will be in black and white. But there is a way to find, you can go in public domain and find out a lot about it. But there's the vocal recording of the man who, he was a reporter, and many reporters were there, but for some reason his was preserved. And it's, he reported from the moment he saw the flame until the moment it crashed, and you can hear him choking up and crying.
Oh yeah.
It's an amazing piece of reporting. So if you're not aware, because there'll be some young people that listen to this that probably never heard about this, but you can go on whatever YouTube or whatever's out there, the Hindenburg, and they made a movie out of it, a presumptuous movie, and you were on it?
I was on it. And it was funny, we're talking about this. I saw, you know how they take these old films and they'll colorize it?
Yeah.
You know, that they've done with like old World War II films or whatever. But I saw one yesterday of the Hindenburg. It still gives me the creeps. And I'll explain why. So in this past life, as I'm reviewing it, before I got on it as this person, and my name was Robert, by the way, I'll explain more about that. So I'm Robert, and I'm supposed to be on this flight. I was some kind of engineer and also a photographer. And before I get on, I had this feeling that I should not get on, but I didn't listen. And so that was how I died. And during this review, like in the past life, as I'm, you know, in a hypnotized kind of state, I found out my name was Robert. I found out he more so talked about how he was a photographer. And then he explained, you know, that feeling of not wanting to get on, but not trusting it and seeing what happened. And so during the regression, the way it was performed on me, and I do perform regressions for people too, the way it's processed is we go through the lifetime, we go through important pieces, and then we go to the end of the life and we say, what do you need to know about this lifetime that Jesse in this lifetime can learn from? And so he'll give an answer, right? Or that person from that lifetime will give an answer. And it was to trust that instinct, you know? Like if I would have known that this was my intuition speaking, I wouldn't have gotten on that blimp, and I may have survived, right? And lived a longer life. And so I want to share this part because this is what truly validated the past life for me. I had got all that information while I was under hypnosis. And around that time, of course we had internet. So I looked up as much as I could, and I couldn't really find anything for a guy named Robert, or they didn't have a lot of, I didn't have a lot of access to information from that era.
Public domain.
I didn't know about public domain, but anyway.
It's a rabbit hole, but public domain.
Right. Yeah, it's a really good resource. But anyway, years later, and this is probably 2 or 3 years later, that had been gone and past, and I forgot about it. I was working at a metaphysical shop in San Antonio, and one of my colleagues, he did QHHT, which is a form of hypnosis, hypnotherapy. And we got to talking about past lives one day, and so I shared that story with him. And I got to thinking, man, I never could find any information. And I wonder, like over a decade later, if there's more information available. And so that evening I went home and I did more research, and this is what happened. I found Robert. I found the man who called himself Robert in my hypnosis, and it talked about his life and, what he did. And it explained that he was an engineer, and I kept reading. And then at the end of the blurb about him, it talked about how he viewed himself as a photographer, and that was like his life. And so I was blown away because that's exactly how he came through in that past life. I mean, I got his name 100% accurate and all this information. And so, my God, talk about getting chills, and validating that. So yeah, just a little side note, but yeah, that intuitive sense of trusting yourself. And, we're still human. I still ignore those feelings sometimes for whatever reason. My ego gets in the way, or, I just don't want to hear it. But it's a process, it's growing. And I think that's an important thing too about, our psychic senses, is that we're constantly learning to refine them. I feel like it doesn't matter how long on your journey of intuitive development you're at, that there's still ways to refine and work on these senses. So yeah. Another sense, go ahead.
Another sense is what?
Another sense I want to ask you about, because I don't think we've talked about this specifically, is clairaudience. That's not
we haven't talked about it.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it. I haven't heard you say anything about it, but that's not a huge one for me. I've had moments throughout my life. One I remember is before my grandmother died about 5 years ago. I woke up from a nap and I hearing her voice calling my name, and I smelt like a perfume, which is another sense. And that was, I didn't know she was going to die the next day. But so that was a way that, I received information. But it happens sometimes in my readings and mediumship, and I've learned to control it or tune into it more, but it's not something I'm really adept with. So what about you?
You are probably more audio than you think you are, because sometimes audio comes in our voice to us. And when we say, I didn't hear that, we assume as humans, we're supposed to hear a detached voice. And that's what you're talking about, right? That detached voice?
Or both. I mean, I've had the internal experience too.
The detached voice is the one that people are afraid of, or it's kind of like the boogeyman voice at night, and they don't trust it because they don't know it. They don't associate it with that's one of your guides or your grandma. But there's also the internal voice that sounds just like us talking to ourselves, which in some ways can be, and often is, one of our guides. If they say, turn left, and you're going, no, I need to turn right, turn left. Something's telling you even if it's your instinct, we can call that,
Right.
for those that are afraid of those voices. Do I use it? Yes. In fact, I have to say, as a child, voices were what I heard first. They're the things that I remember the best. Even from 3, 4 years old, I heard conversations going on, and I would think they were conversations in another room, but they were around me. And one of my guides is a Black Panther, or that's how he visualizes himself. And I know now that he was already a grown entity, but he was small enough to fit over my feet. When my feet got really cold out at my grandmother's, she would heat up an iron and wrap it in newspaper and cloth and put it in the bed with us girls.
Wow.
Yeah, usually my cousin spending the night. But I can remember waking up at night, moving my feet and feeling something that was there that I knew my grandmother had not put there, because what she put the iron, not an iron like today, but a heavy iron
Oh yeah.
that
I've
they
seen.
heated up on bricks or something like that, or the stove, and then they'd wrap it and use it for clothing or whatever. But it would feel like a big heavy blanket. And then I realized it was this Black Panther. Well, as I grew, it grew. And I could, if I felt alone or I felt scared or something, I could always feel the panther at my back, which was, I thought, interesting. So it was like having another being in the bed with me.
Yeah.
But I would hear, and my main guide this time is called She, SHE. That's all I've ever known her as, is She. And she's usually in a corner someplace. And she can be as tiny as a grain of sand, or she can be towers tall. Depends on what she thinks what kind of attention she needs. She's literally got, as a grain of sand in my eye, which has been interesting. That's all about, what do you need to see, or what do you need to get out of your vision? But she doesn't talk very often. But when she does, I better listen. It's the way it is. There are 4 basics for me. Can't speak for you, but there are 4 basic guides. And then you've got some angel assignments, usually one major one, which is really just a hologram, and other beings that come and go. We are teachers as well to spirits that are learning how to be guides. You can read the Jane Roberts Seth books, but please read them in order. They're little novelettes.
She had recordings too, right? But oh no.
They did record, but that was back when it was reel to reel.
Right.
So I don't know what verbally is out there for her, but her husband recorded a lot of sessions for her. But Seth was really hard on her. He basically killed her. He was so hard on her body, cracking bones and things like that to validate what was happening. But she was a children's book writer, so he just kind of slipped right in, and she channeled him. Seth Speaks. There's a whole series of Seth books. But he had her write these little novelettes kind of as a teaching tool. And there's Seth and Time Machine. They're like 3 or 4, and you can read them depending on how fast you read. But if you do that, please read them in order, or you lose the links about what happens with your spirit in training. But the hearing part of it, when I read those books, and oh gosh, now I can't remember the other one. He was a pilot, and he wrote some wonderful books about a bird. Why did I even bring it up if I can't share the name of it? I'll add it to some of them. Yeah. And I read both of those at the same time. The hearing is so important, but it's the distinction of what you're hearing that's really important. And she can talk to me, and it may sound like my voice, but it's the vocabulary that she uses. And she often comes across as a very soft voice. And it'll be, Elaine, pay attention. Honey, you didn't hear me. She never gets loud. It's always almost like my grandmother's talking to me. But my grandmother had a slight little brogue. So, but I know she's voice. And then I have my panther, who sounds very, in our world, I'd say manly, that guttural, but if you could imagine a purr as a way of speaking, he's got this, purry sound, but it's words. But those are the things I grew up with. not to have them to me would be weird. And every now and then I will have other voices come through, and that falls into my mediumship packet. I was in Oklahoma to do a fair, and I was staying at a hotel, not a fancy hotel, but a nice hotel, more of a motel. And I stayed over one day to do like 5 or 6 readings, and then I was going to go ahead and drive home. One of the people was a young lady who was trying very hard to reach her great grandfather, who was full-blooded, well, we're in Oklahoma, Indian. And I had given her, I said, I cannot guarantee that. Sometimes they come true and sometimes they don't. Well, we were in the room by ourselves. There was a table set up, and I'm going about my reading with her, some tarot, some psychic. With me, you get both. I can't block either one of, even if I don't have the cards out, I see them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, we were going along, and all of a sudden something took over and my fist went down on that table. I thought it was going to break the table, and her great grandfather came through with all feathers flying. He was, to be an Indian, he was a giant of a man.
Mm.
He would have been considered above average in height, girth. He was dramatic about, he could be saying, I love you, but it was going to come out in drama, just, he was, and obviously very strong. And she asked,
might have some experience with it.
Yeah, you think? And I was worried about her safety because I reached for her like he was going to hug her. And I was afraid with him coming through me, I would hurt her, not with my strength, but with the strength that he was giving me. And he finally realized what he was doing, and he backed off. But he still had this drama in his vocals. And as a medium, which I don't often call myself that because I don't guarantee it, that was probably the most dramatic vocal that ever came to me and through me. But I'm not surprised it did, because I'm comfortable with voices.
Yeah.
When they're not there, I worry about them. I worry about, okay, where are you? Where are you? Come back.
That you just kind of clarified a point too, with like any of the clairs, any of the psychic senses. We tend to lean towards what we're more comfortable with, because spirit knows that's an easy way to get our attention. It's an easy way to gain access. And at least for me, like the way I understand the clairs too, in some way, is that it's our bridge in communication with spirit, and that the more we're in tune with certain qualities of ourself, like our imagination, our intuitive, visual sense. I notice a lot of people who are creatives, like artists and things like that, have a really amazing connection to, clairvoyance. And then you being someone who, that's how they came through. And so that was
my first experience as a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Voices. Yeah.
And then for me, being someone who's just naturally a deep feeler and, empathic in that way, like that's an easy way for me. And then we have I think the last two we didn't talk about is claircognizance, which is super similar in some ways to what we were talking about earlier with just the knowing, or picking up on kind of things like, this isn't the right place for me, or, I know this isn't a good situation. You just kind of feel it, It's just something that feels really centering and sturdy about that. And then the other clair, which is for me rare, but also potent when it happens, is clairgustance, which is taste and smell. I think it combines the two. That's a rarity for me, but I've had times, mainly in my mediumship. And another thing about psychic work and mediumship that I've learned is that the things you're really good at or have a strong connection to in your life, spirit will use that as a way to get information. And so I love food. I grew up, I think our families have some kind of, we all have a connection to food because it's a communal thing. But that's an avenue that spirit gets my attention. And so many times in mediumship readings where, grandma who was a baker, or that she was known for cooking some kind of specialty meal, that spirit will show me that and also let me smell it. One of the most profound experiences of that, probably a few years ago, I was doing a reading for a couple, I believe, and grandma came through and she shows me in the kitchen. She shows me, she's taking a pan out of the oven, and then it flashes and I see cherry cobbler. But not only do I see it, but man, I smelled it. It smelled so good. I think the way spirit can really give us the depth of information on that level just made it so much more validating to me. And I shared that with her, and she was like, I'm not really sure about that one. I don't know about her baking. I think she was in the kitchen, and, anyway, I get an email from this client days after our session, and she goes, I talked to my dad about his mom, that's who we were connecting with, and cherry cobbler was what she cooked all the time for him growing up. And sure enough, so those are rare, but I really love those. And yesterday, as a matter of fact, I have a mediumship development group that I started a few months back. We have a small little crew, and we were doing readings yesterday for each other. That's, we just kind of work on our senses and work on our skill set. And I'm reading for one of, the people in my group, and an aunt of hers is coming through, and she just had this very like flamboyant kind of big energy about her. And then she shows me through, it was kind of weird because it wasn't entirely that sense, but I had a reaction to it, and I'll explain why. I got the reaction in my body of smelling too much perfume. Someone walks by you and they're just doused in cologne or perfume, and you go, ugh. I didn't actually smell it per se, but I had that physical reaction to it, and also validated in that reading too. So these ways are a little, to me, kind of entertaining. It's just such a different experience of psychic phenomenon,
You're talking about the smells and taste.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm doing tarot cards, I tend to get seasons.
Huh.
When is this going to happen? Sure, I can ask a seven card reading, which is yes or no. And will this happen before the spring equinox? Something like that. Yeah. Well, for us here in Texas, a big thing about spring is bluebonnets.
Oh, yeah.
But it could be another flower in another state. Okay. I've had experiences where I'll get and not knowing what somebody's state flower is, even if they're living here in Texas now, I'll either get a bluebonnet or I'll get their state flower. And I'll say, it's red. I can't get a clear picture, but it's your state. It was your state or your favorite state's flower, and it's red and it has so many petals on it. And inevitably they'll say, oh, that's whatever. And I say, well, around that time. But this year they may come early or come late. Because we here in Austin, or in our area, we know when the bluebonnets are supposed to bloom. They don't always bloom exactly 2 days before Easter. But I mean, that's when I was growing up, it was always around Easter time. Well, now it's not because of our environmental changes. So sometimes I get a smell. I can smell snow because I lived in Germany for so long when I was a kid. So I'm familiar with that smell of cold. And it hurts your nose, and it hurts your mouth, it hurts your lips. And I mean, when it's really bad. And that's how I use it, how it comes through me. It's not that I'll ask spirit, they want to know if it's spring or winter. And I can, if we're really in a hurry, like at a psychic fair, and I don't feel like we have time to throw another card or another set, they'll usually pop in with something like that to help me answer their question.
Yeah. Okay.
And sometimes you get something as simple as they're not supposed to know.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Or that's not been set in stone yet. Well, is it going to happen? Yes or no? Okay, but they just don't need to know too much. And public doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
They don't get that you're not always. Yeah.
Yeah. And one big.
Yeah, you're not supposed to know everything.
One thing I was going to say we left out, but we haven't left out anything. One thing I think we should talk a little bit about is what you're, kind of touching on, is that when we're reading, when we're tapping into psychic information, that it's an energy, right? And that we're connecting with a quality of information from this energy. And energy is not stagnant. Energy is not guaranteed. It's not set in stone, like you said, and that we're constantly in flux. The collective is constantly in flux. Our, God-given will changes sometimes too often. And that when we're connecting and helping people, that, we're giving them great, accurate information about outcomes, but because of the fact that energy changes and that we influence energy, that things can shift and change, within a heartbeat. And that it's a good thing because, your life's not totally set in stone. Maybe we have, some sense of destiny or purpose, and that's what guides us, but everything around that is a choice. And that, spirit is here to support us and not to command us necessarily, unless we're in real danger, right? Then they'll step in and
we're not supposed to leave at that time. They can help.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And they'll come kick us in the butt a little bit. But yeah, that's one of the things I think is helpful to know, despite how good we are at, communicating spirit's advice, that, you're the one that's really in control of your destiny, and that you have the choice to listen to us or not. You have the choice to listen to, what spirit has to say or not. And 9.9 times out of 10, if I listen to spirit, I can have a more positive experience that leads me to more learning, growth, wisdom, knowledge, and, soul expansion type experiences that, are really leading me to my best and highest, right? But that's also a choice too, So I think that's worth saying. I wanted to share that. And that's something we've talked about before, I think when we were doing tarot together. But yeah, I think.
I want you to go back to.
Go ahead.
Think what? Nope. Think what?
Well,
think what?
So I wanted to leave a little bit of time. We're at 12 o'clock. I probably got to go in about half an hour, but
we can always come back together. Not a problem.
I want to leave a little time to talk a bit about, and this could be a segue to a later conversation about, how studying the tarot led me to learning ritual magic, high magic, and how that as an energy worker has been one of the most transformative things for me now, and how I've used it. Actually, recently, I didn't talk to you about this, but recently used what I know and the foundations of ritual magic to get me out of depression, and how powerful of a tool it's been for me energetically.
Wow.
So let's
first of all,
yeah.
First of all, explain what you're identifying as magic.
Yeah. So
because different cultures have different attitudes, and what kind of magic you're studying. If you are studying with anyone, or you're educating yourself on a base level now I know you've got a stack of books. Not everybody's going to have access to that picture, but I think you need to post it somewhere.
Okay.
It's amazing. I mean, one of those books was 4 inches tall. It looked like, and I'm going, that's about 3 years of reading for me. Okay.
It has been. Well, I'll just kind of give you the lead in first. So, just to explain, I practice Western approach to magic, Western magic, Hermeticism, all of these systems that kind of came through. And
what's Hermeticism? Explain that to someone who does not know.
Okay. So Hermeticism is based in the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, who was believed to be a prophet, a god, who came down with this kind of great knowledge, this spiritual knowledge of kind of what created some forms of magic. And there are 7 laws of 7 principles of Hermeticism. I'm not going to go into that, but they basically are basic forms of knowledge that help us as spiritual beings to refine our spiritual state of being so that we can attain quote unquote enlightenment, but I perceive it more as betterment of the soul, like improvement of every quality of our lives by directly affecting and influencing our spiritual being, our energetic state. So Hermetics is kind of a way to refine your energy in a way that you can control it and utilize this ability to navigate your life in a more conscious way. So a lot of it is like learning to control your thought process and be aware of those things, control your emotional world and responses and reactions so that you become someone who harnesses these energies and is not controlled by them, right? Because I mean, a lot of what we see in the world around us is just, a lot of us have reacted out of fear, right? And so that if we're not in control of fear or these types of energies, then that's, we're creating a certain type of result from that. But if we can control these aspects of ourselves, we can change how the world responds to us and change how we act in the world. So the Hermetic principles help you get really in tune with the qualities of energy that we are. And one of the first books I got, so when I was studying tarot with you, I learned about Kabbalah because I read The Fool's Pilgrimage. You let me borrow that book. Great book. So that book takes the Rider-Waite Tarot and goes through, I think, all the major arcana cards and ties them into the Tree of Life. And so that was kind of my first step. And then through that book, I learned about Hermeticism, and being an energy worker, that was right up my alley. So I bought a book called Introduction to Hermetics by Franz Barden. And he was very well known in the early 1900s, early to mid 1900s, for his work in Hermeticism. He developed and refined some very disciplined systems to where, this book is basically teaching you how to work with meditation, visualization, energies, the elemental energies, so that you learn to familiarize yourself with all these parts that you're composed of, your system is composed of, and also to be able to tune into the energies that are around us, the earth energies, the cosmic energies, the planetary energies. So he's got a system. It's like super disciplined though. I'm more of a freelancer when it comes, like, I like to take ideas, onboard them, filter them, and then kind of figure out a way that works for me, which I think is a really good process for me. So that book helped kind of kickstart. And then on a whim, I learned about the Golden Dawn. So Golden Dawn is one of the most well-known groups of Western occultism, Western magic, high magic practitioners, which Aleister Crowley was also part of the Golden Dawn. And this system came through in the late 1800s, I think, was very well known to have carried some really deep knowledge from ancient Egyptian mysticism and all these ancient practices that they, in some sense, preserved this and brought it into Western culture and developed a system
And
around.
their membership was a who's who in
Right.
metaphysics, religion, teachers, artists, writers. They would have tea greeting. They would have tea and food sitting around. If you could imagine some of the most famous of people
Yeah.
in the world at the time, people would come from around the world that heard about their group. And even if they weren't a member of the group, they'd come join at someone's house and get high or eat or talk or, do whatever. The Golden Dawn, it was one of the the biggest secrets
Yeah.
organizations for years and years and years. What word got out, and the best of the best of the best.
Yeah.
So public, look into them. They're amazing. Okay.
They had
Shut up now.
No, you're right. They had and still have a significant influence in bringing these traditions to Western culture. And I think without
the Rosicrucians was another group that those two groups are. I would love to have been on a fly on the wall. Just to listen.
The order, I think, is the Rosicrucian system is very similar to. But yeah, so like when I started researching more, I learned about the Golden Dawn, and I started looking up books on Amazon, and I saw that giant book. It's the Order of the Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie. He was also a really well-known mystic, and he had taken a lot of information and brought it back out and put it into some workings and did some writing around it and organized it. And he has what I have. It's behind me on the table, that big giant book right there. So it's got basically all the rites and traditions and workings of the Golden Dawn in that book. And when I first got it, it made no sense to me. But I was like, I know I have to have it. It was a $50 book. I was like, hell, I'm just going to get it. And at this point, this was probably 5 years ago when I got it. Now I can read through the whole thing. I understand it. It's taken, like you said earlier, it would take you 3-4 years. It's taken that long, but now I've made sense of it. But recognize what did it for me, and what really got me interested was realizing that magic isn't, I think, a lot of what people perceive or how it's perceived or how it's demonstrated in entertainment world and all that. Magic is really about energy work. It is a way to develop your own energy, and it depends on what type of magic you're practicing. I'll just kind of talk about high magic. It's a way to develop your energy through these ancient practices so that your energetic influence over your reality promotes a more likely outcome for an ideal event to come to fruition. So we're not necessarily, as high magicians, I'm not trying to manipulate reality to conform to my will. That's a form of magic. Some people might call that low magic, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? It's still your intention. The high magic says, I'm going to change myself to influence the world around me from me as kind of an energetic center point. And I'm going to change me first so that the way I interact with the world and the way that the world interacts with me changes. So it's a very spiritual, more spiritual attainment type approach to magic, which I definitely resonate and identify with. And when I got the, Golden Dawn book, there were a few introductory rituals that I learned. One called the Kabbalistic Cross, which I think was in that Fool's Pilgrimage book the first time I heard about it.
It is.
Yeah. And that ritual is about connecting your being to divine light. And it uses a lot of the teachings and wisdom of the Tree of Life, tonal vibrations of ancient names of God, which I'll tell you this is something I've really learned, is that the Catholic Church is one of the most misunderstood systems of magic that exists today. It's pretty unreal.
Yeah.
I don't know that they would ever admit it, but so many things that happen in the Catholic Church are like Kabbalistic in nature and come from these ancient traditions, and it's really funny to me. But I started introducing these practices, and what I noticed is that when I would do the Kabbalistic Cross, which is a kind of a preliminary ritual to what is the most common and most important ritual in Western magic, which is called the lesser ritual of the pentagram. And it's using visualization and again, toning to empower your energy. And it really does. It's the purpose of that ritual is to fortify your aura, to empower the way you show up in life, which ultimately influences your decision making, right? Influences how the world responds to you. So learning that ritual, and I started practicing it, immediately got results from it, and amazing things were happening as a result. And I was like, whoa, wow, there's something to this. And it was in the practice of it. Like how earlier I talked about, we can have all this knowledge and read the books and stuff, but until we put it into practice, we don't gain the wisdom. But now I see like there's a reason this stuff has been, one, kind of hidden from the eyes of the public. Yeah. But also like how incredibly powerful these systems are. And that, another thing I think that's been attributed to magic is like, oh, it's evil and the occult is blah, 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 blah. And that's, again, I think another way to kind of suppress it, right? So when we say something's evil, then people are less likely to, want to understand it. But it's life-changing. It's been life-changing for me. And so I went through and I studied once I got into my practice, I started doing some practical work with a group out in LA called 22 Teachings. They're an awesome resource. I did some online work. They have a temple out there, and they're not specific Golden Dawn tradition, but it's very similar. So I did some working with them. I did path working with them, some astral work with them, which again we'll go more in depth another time. But I'll just want to say this about I've come around full circle. Had a lot of life stuff happen, and I had some, I had to move, I think 3 times within a year and a half, and just like stuff happening. So it was really difficult for me to maintain my practice. I also had some kind of personal stuff happening too that I needed to focus on. But in the past year, let's just say 6 months, I've had space, literal space, internally and externally, to start refining this practice. And so I've built on the foundations that I learned years ago, and it's been powerful for me. And the deeper I go into myself and understanding the wisdom that's embedded in these systems, the wisdom of the universe, right? I had this revelation a few months ago that told me, or that showed itself to me, that magic is really about, the systems of magic are keys to unlocking the secrets of the universe. And I'm not talking about secrets of, specific ideas or knowledge or understanding, but real deep wisdom and how things work, and how we as spiritual energetic beings have the ability to connect and communicate and interact with these, interface with subtle forces of energy that we all have access to. We just don't know it until it's, we know it, right? So the last thing I'll say, what got me back into it more consistently was I had gone through a period of depression several months ago. During it, I just had this thought that said, you know what, let's take charge of this, and let's do something to combat this depression. Let's not wallow in it. I've done things to work with my depression and anxiety before, and I just wasn't interested in using those same tools. So picked up my ritual sword or dagger, and I started doing the foundational practices again, and immediately my energy started to improve. And I can guarantee and say to you 100% that was what helped me move through it so quickly. It's not like I got rid of the depression, because, there's a reason I think we go through these phases, right? There's some learning in that.
Absolutely.
But I had an incredibly powerful tool to gently guide me through that process and bring me through it at a bit of a more accelerated rate is what I feel. So, and that having that impactful experience doing this energy work really changed my view on it entirely and gave me a new sense of commitment. So I've deepened my practice. I'm learning other systems now at the end of the Golden Dawn, like kind of adept practices. There's working with angels, and they call it Enochian magic. So I'm dabbling, I'm learning that now. And then I also joined a group with Alexis, who I think you're doing a talk with. He's awesome. He just started a ritual working study group, which I feel like I've been missing in my life, especially in person. Unfortunately, it is closed now. So hopefully if, he does another one, if you're interested down the road, but having community and someone to share these ideas with and really discuss and study together. And we've only had one session. It's been amazing so far, but we're doing like
you guys have a past life connection. I see a lot of fire around the two of you. So
yeah.
Actually, there were 4, what I would consider 4 brothers. Now, I don't know whether that was blood brothers or brothers in a sect, or I don't know, but the brothers, like a brotherhood.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You guys have worked together several past lives.
I believe it.
I'm not surprised that you, yeah. That's a strong group for you, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Strong group.
Well, I
want to say right now, two things.
Yeah.
Send me a list of the books, because you're going to have your own library, so to speak, on the site, on the website. And whether it's, I know that you did a marvelous, some marvelous recordings of meditation. If they're still available, please let the public know that and how they can find that. We will, when we introduce you, after this has been edited and we get you scheduled, there will be all of that in the introduction and the date that you will be on. Of course, you'll be notified. But the library, I don't care how many people recommend a book, I'm going to include it. I'm never going to exclude it, because it's important in how you developed. So your books, your vocalizations, the people you've mentored with, people whose name you would like to share as part of your, even people you hope to be mentored by.
Okay.
You'd like to take classes with, even if they're online. Or I'm all about in person as much as we can. We can't all fly to Alaska, but as much as we can. But give us that list of knowledge, and you can continue to add to it. I mean, a year from now, if you found 3, 4 more books that you just gobbled up, send me the list. I'll add them to your list. So, and secondly, see, folks, we didn't have enough time to get to everything, but you got a nice little tease about what we're going to come back to Jesse in the future.
Yeah.
And he and I don't know if he has his schedule book in front of him, but we will set a schedule for Ritual Magick. We can call it whatever you want to call it.
Sounds good.
And we've got past lives.
Oh,
I want to know more about your past life training, because, folks, it's not easy to guide people through past life. There's a psychological part of that. It's just not simple meditation or hypnosis. It's not every hypnosis expert can lead people on past lives. It's tricky. You've got to be careful that you don't leave them there. You have to make sure they feel safe and comfortable. And Jesse can explain to that more when we get here. So we've got at least 2 more 2.5-hour sessions with Jesse. And Jesse, I don't know whether Adam will break this up or not. That's why I often ask for 2 to 2.5 hours. We're going to shrink it down by getting rid of the oohs and the ahs. I know he will.
Okay.
But he's not one to, because he works with metaphysicians, he's not one to leave out your verbiage. Your verbiage is very important. Mine is not. And if we had gotten off on what your dog had for dinner last night, he would probably, which we didn't hear the puppy, he would probably cut it out. All that stuff is not necessary, although it makes you seem very human. But so we've got at least 2 more, and probably out of those will come some more sessions. But I think past lives are really, really important to development. Really important. Well, and it was for me too. I've gotten my past life stuff just kind of here, there, just sometimes in my meditation, sometimes in dream form. I've had a lady walked over to my table one time in Little Rock, Arkansas. I was there to do a fair, and she was not part of our group, but she walked over and she said, I couldn't help but hear your voice and know that I've heard it before. But when I heard it before, you had an Irish brogue. And she didn't know my name.
Oh, that's awesome.
She had no clue. And I said, well, that could be because my last name is Ireland, and that's my lineage. And I said, I bet we were part of a healing group. And she went, I am a healer. And I said, are you doing the fair here? And she said, no, I own a shop in Nebraska.
Oh, wow.
What are the odds of two people from two states coming to another state to connect? And her first name was Sure. I mean, it was amazing. So you just never know. And we talked on the phone after that when she got back to Nebraska and I got home. And we came up with some phenomenal information about past lives.
Awesome.
And her daughter was real into this, and she added her 10 cents and 10,000 cents. And I only got to be with her for about 3 years before she passed. So that makes me really sad. And I've lost track of her sister, of her daughter rather. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we can deep dive into that. But
I would love to. And I this tarot, from tarot to magic, I think that's an interesting, I could see that because the Kabbalistic studies, for one thing, easily.
It's all in there. It's all in there. You just got
to. I'm really excited about this with you because I get to watch you grow, and I get to learn from you as you grow. And to me, that's just, I'm taking master classes from all of you guys by just having conversations, by just having conversations. And that's what I would like our public to share as well. Okay. And of course, when we get all this set up, I'll have a list of your phone numbers and your landing sites. And because I know you have different media platforms that are available to the public, and they will be on the introduction, and it will be under your name 24/7, so people can find you. So
great.
Get ready, Jesse. I don't know when we're going to launch. It looks like October.
That's great. Yeah. Look forward to it. Well, thank you, Elaine. I need to get.
Thank you, sweetie. I'm just so excited about all of this. I'm excited about everything you're doing, and I'm excited. Thank you for sharing your world.
Of course.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sweetie.
Love you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, folks. Don't forget to share a smile with somebody today, folks. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for tuning into The Conversations with the Ancients, where we take you on a journey where you'll hear voices of metaphysicians from the past, as well as today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Remember to visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with the Ancients.